April 8, 1943. High above Caen, France, at 27,000 feet, Oberleutnant Ralph Hermichin couldn't hide the smirk under his oxygen mask. From the cockpit of his FW-190A5, the veteran ace of Jagdgeschwader 26 watched as unfamiliar silhouettes clawed their way up through the crystal-clear skies toward his formation. They looked like flying milk bottles. He chuckled over the radio to his wingman, eyes tracing the massive P-47 Thunderbolts struggling against the thin air. Below, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward, engines screaming, wings loaded with firepower that seemed almost comically mismatched to their massive bodies. To German pilots, accustomed to nimble Spitfires and swift Soviet machines, these Americans looked absurd. Barrel-shaped fuselages, tiny wings, and propellers larger than anything in the Luftwaffe arsenal. What Hermichin didn't know, what no one circling above could imagine, was that they were watching history in the making. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would become terror incarnate in the skies, their 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns delivering a deafening, deadly storm. Packed into those broad wings was math and mechanics designed for destruction. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, 6,000 rounds per minute, enough to shred an enemy plane in less than 2 seconds. The story of that morning began when Major Donald Bully of the 335th Fighter Squadron spotted the German formation lining up to attack. A former Eagle Squadron veteran fresh from RAF Spitfires, he knew something his men didn't. Surviving in a P-47 meant forgetting everything they thought they knew about air combat. This wasn't a conventional fighter. While Germany had chased lightweight interceptors built for turning and climbing, Republic Aviation had created a monster, a high-altitude juggernaut that redefined aerial warfare with sheer power, mass, and firepower. Among the 56 American pilots scattered across the French sky that day were men who would later become legends, future aces whose names would haunt the Luftwaffe. But on April 8, 1943, they were green, novices in a radical new machine. Facing the world's most experienced fighter pilots, the Germans had been fighting nonstop since 1939, seasoned by campaigns in Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Americans, 0 days in combat. This is a story about industrial might meeting tactical genius, how brute force and smart design merged into air supremacy, and how laughter in the German cockpits turned to terror as synchronized Browning machine guns found their mark. The P-47 Thunderbolt itself was born from panic in June 1940. As German fighters swept through France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, was given urgent orders by the U.S. Army Air Corps. Build a high-altitude interceptor to match the Luftwaffe's best. What he built instead was a beast. It will be a dinosaur, he told his team, but a dinosaur with good proportions. When the XP-47B prototype first flew on May 6, 1941, jaws dropped. At 9,900 pounds empty, it was 65% heavier than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. Its turbo-supercharger system, running complex ducts through the fuselage, gave it a comically inflated look. Test pilots approached in disbelief. "This actually flies?" they asked. And fly it did, like nothing else at altitude. The 2,000 horsepower Pratt and Whitney R2800 engine kept full power at 27,000 feet, while German fighters struggled to breathe. But it wasn't easy. Major Hubert Hubzika, training the 56th Fighter Group in Connecticut, hated it at first. From September 1942 to January 1943, the P-47 killed more American pilots in training than the Germans would in combat. It ground-looped, torque-rolled, and dove like a madman. Shockwaves froze controls as pilots discovered compressibility at high speeds. Yet those who mastered it found a machine like no other. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma and future top ace, said of his first flight, "It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. You didn't fly it. You aimed it." The first encounters over Europe confirmed German suspicions. P-47s couldn't turn with FW-19s or climb with Bf-10-9s. Luftwaffe pilots developed tactics to exploit this. Attack from below, force-turning fights where agility mattered more than firepower. Hutchman Joseph Pips, Priller of JG-26, reported, "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys call them Indiana, fat targets pretending to be warriors." And at first, statistics seemed to confirm him. In their first month, The Americans lost 14 Thunderbolts for just 3 confirmed German kills. Even the RAF joked, "Best evasive maneuver in a P-47? Unstrap and run around the cockpit." But something the Germans didn't see was happening. The P-47s that went down had taken punishment that would have shredded a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. One returned from a mission on May 4th riddled with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, and kept flying. Its massive radial engine shrugged off hits that would stop any liquid-cooled fighter. And when its guns found their mark, the destruction was absolute. The Thunderbolt's battery created a deadly convergence zone, sustaining fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in air combat. And then came June 26, 1943, over Lazo, France. Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron was about to show the Luftwaffe exactly what a P-47 could do. Robert S. Johnson would go on to become legendary on both sides of the conflict. On that fateful day, his formation of 48 P-47s was returning from escort duty when they were ambushed by 16 Fu-190s from 2/JG-26, led by Headman Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, the younger brother of the famous Adolf Galland. The Germans struck with brutal precision, diving from the sun with a speed advantage that seemed impossible to counter. Flying at the rear of his formation, Johnson found himself in the crossfire almost immediately. His Thunderbolt took catastrophic hits within seconds. 20mm cannon shells exploding across the fuselage, shattering the canopy, spraying hydraulic fluid into the cockpit, tearing away the engine cowling, and igniting a fire behind the instrument panel. Shrapnel tore through his nose and leg, and when he tried to bail out, he discovered the canopy was jammed. A 20mm round had fused it shut. At 27,000 feet, Johnson was trapped in a dying aircraft. What happened next defied every expectation. With nearly no forward visibility, a barely functioning engine, and controls that responded only intermittently, Johnson somehow leveled the aircraft and pointed it toward England. The P-47 kept flying, where any other fighter would have plummeted to the ground. Then a lone FW-190 appeared, piloted by an unknown German from 2/JG-26. Historical records can't definitively identify him, but reports suggest several possible candidates. The German closed in on the crippled Thunderbolt, unleashing a volley of cannon and machine gun fire. Johnson huddled behind the armor plate, praying as his plane took the hits. Yet the Thunderbolt absorbed the onslaught. And when the German pilot ran out of cannon rounds and switched to machine guns, Johnson's aircraft still held together. In disbelief, the German rolled alongside, staring at the flying wreck. Johnson could see the young blonde pilot's face change from confidence to confusion, then to what looked almost like fear. After emptying his remaining ammo, the Germans saluted, an informal acknowledgement of the impossible, and peeled away. Johnson managed to land at Manston, engine failing, after his crew chief had stopped counting bullet holes somewhere past 200. One cannon shell had detonated inches from his head, another struck the armor behind his seat, and 3 of the 4 main fuselage longerons were shot through. Yet somehow, the P-47 had brought him home. The survival of Johnson's plane sent shockwaves through both air forces. American engineers, studying the wreckage, realized they had underestimated their own creation. German intelligence initially refused to believe the reports, dismissing them as exaggeration. But multiple pilot testimonies confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had endured everything the Luftwaffe's best could throw at it and survived. By July 1943, American pilots had begun to exploit the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, commander of the 56th Fighter Group, discovered the secret through brutal trial and error. Don't turn with them. Don't try to climb at low altitude. Use the aircraft's weight, use its power, and above all, use its guns. What had seemed like a disadvantage, the Thunderbolt's massive heft, was actually a weapon. In a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could hit 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter even in a vertical dive. That speed could be converted into altitude in a zoom climb, leaving pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, one of the first American aces in Europe, perfected what became known as the boom and zoom tactic, or as pilots called it, the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. P-47 formations would climb to 30,000 feet, higher than German fighters could comfortably operate. Then, rolling inverted, they'd dive at staggering speeds, guns blazing, creating a deadly wall of lead that German pilots could neither evade nor withstand. The firepower was brutal and precise. German pilots who survived described it as facing an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught in that convergence didn't just fall, they disintegrated. This raw firepower reached its full expression on August 17, 1943, during the dual raids on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest American penetration into Germany at that point. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, spotted a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-110s, twin-engine bomber killers armed to the teeth with cannon and rockets, targeting a group of B-17. Schilling's 4 P-47s dove from 28,000 feet like hammers from the sky. Gunner Una Fizia, Heinrich Roth, one of the few survivors, later recounted in interrogation, "The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired again. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart, not shot down, destroyed. In under 2 seconds, 8 German fighters were gone, wings separated, tails severed, crew compartments shredded. The P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, creating a 6-foot-wide convergence zone, raining nearly 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition alone was a revelation of American industrial capacity. While German cannons carried 120 to 200 rounds, American pilots could sustain fire for more than half a minute, mixing armor-piercing, incendiary, and tracer rounds to destroy and ignite. Lieutenant Colonel Francis "Gabby" Gabreski, Europe's top American ace with 28 victories, put it simply, "When you hit them with all 8 guns, they don't just go down, they explode." I saw a 109 literally cut in half. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was beginning to realize another terrifying truth about the P-47. Its performance improved dramatically with altitude, while German fighters started to struggle. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained full power all the way up to 30,000 feet. German aircraft, relying on single- or two-stage mechanical superchargers, were losing performance rapidly above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's top aces with 206 confirmed victories, would discover this the hard way. On October 8, 1943, while leading JG-1 against a formation of B-17s over Bremen at 28,000 feet, Philippe's FW-190A6 felt sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. His BMW 801 engine, so powerful at medium altitude, was gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. In a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could hit 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter even in a vertical dive. That speed could be converted into altitude in a zoom climb, leaving pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, one of the first American aces in Europe, perfected what became known as the boom and zoom tactic, or as pilots called it, the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. P-47 formations would climb to 30,000 feet, higher than German fighters could comfortably operate. Then, rolling inverted, they'd dive at staggering speeds, guns blazing, creating a deadly wall of lead that German pilots could neither evade nor withstand. The firepower was brutal and precise. German pilots who survived described it as facing an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught in that convergence didn't just fall, they disintegrated. This raw firepower reached its full expression on August 17, 1943, during the dual raids on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest American penetration into Germany at that point. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, spotted a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-110s, twin-engine bomber killers armed to the teeth with cannon and rockets, targeting a group of B-17s. Schilling's 4 P-47s dove from 28,000 feet like hammers from the sky. Gunner Una Fizia, Heinrich Roth, one of the few survivors, later recounted in interrogation, "The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired again. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. In under 2 seconds, 8 German fighters were gone, wings separated, tails severed, crew compartments shredded. The P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, creating a 6-foot-wide convergence zone raining nearly 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition alone was a revelation of American industrial capacity. While German cannons carried 120 to 200 rounds, American pilots could sustain fire for more than half a minute, mixing armor-piercing, incendiary, and tracer rounds to destroy and ignite. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, Europe's top American ace with 28 victories, put it simply, when you hit them with all 8 guns, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was beginning to realize another terrifying truth about the P-47. Its performance improved dramatically with altitude, while German fighters started to struggle. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained full power all the way up to 30,000 feet. German aircraft, relying on single- or two-stage mechanical superchargers, were losing performance rapidly above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's top aces with 206 confirmed victories, would discover this the hard way. On October 8, 1943, while leading JG-1 against a formation of B-17s over Bremen at 28,000 feet, Philipp's FW-190A6 felt sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. His BMW 801 engine, so powerful at medium altitude, was gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were sitting ducks. Robert Johnson, now a seasoned combat pilot well on his way to ace status, spotted Philipp's distinctive FW-190 with its elaborate nose art at 31,000 feet. Johnson opened fire from 300 yards with a 30-degree deflection. Every round struck home along the fuselage. The enemy aircraft exploded instantly. Philipp's death sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their very best, a man with over 500 combat missions across both eastern and western fronts, could be taken down so decisively, what hope did the average pilot have? The German High Command ordered an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities. By November 1943, the report delivered to Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring painted a sobering picture. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could reach. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier. Its cockpit was protected with a 3/8-inch steel plate, a 1/2-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates around the engine. Most alarmingly, the aircraft could absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still make it home. By January 1944, a new variant arrived in England that would complete the P-47's transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. The P-47D-22 featured a Hamilton standard hydroprop with massive 13-foot paddle blades that tore into the air like giant knives. Climb rate improved dramatically. What had once been a sluggish 2,200 feet per minute at sea level now jumped to 3,000 feet per minute, matching or surpassing most German fighters. Acceleration improved as well, allowing Thunderbolts to build energy quickly in level flight. Veteran German ace headman Heinz Knoke of JG-11 encountered these new P-47s in February 1944 near Hanover. In his combat diary, he wrote, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced them expecting our usual advantage, but they turned into us and climbed with us. Schmitt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller didn't just improve performance, it changed the Thunderbolt's signature sound. The tips reached supersonic speeds, producing a thundering roar that could be heard miles away. German troops on the ground reported they could identify approaching P-47s by sound alone, calling it the Donnerschlag, or thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks could escort bombers deep into Germany. 2 108-gallon wing tanks, or a 75-gallon belly tank, extended the range over 1,000 miles, and the paddle blade prop ensured they could fight effectively immediately after dropping fuel. German strategy shifted, focusing on attacking bombers in the hope of inflicting enough losses to halt the American daylight campaign. But to do so, German pilots had to fly through the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal task. Even the Luftwaffe's best began to respect the Thunderbolt. Major G.A. Roll, with 275 victories mostly on the Eastern Front, survived an encounter on March 6, 1944, but was badly wounded. He later recalled, "We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters, just gone, turned into burning debris. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream meant instant death. The P-47's endurance was another weapon. While German fighters burned fuel at maximum power, the big American radials could cruise efficiently at high altitude, staying with bombers for hours, rotating top cover while still holding enough fuel for combat and return. As more P-51 Mustangs arrived in spring 1944 to handle long-range escort, P-47 units shifted increasingly to ground attack, a role that would make them the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The transition began in earnest in April 1944 as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine guns were deadly against ground targets, able to penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles. A 2-second burst could deliver 160 half-inch projectiles into a target the size of a truck. With bombs and rockets, the P-47 became a true multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry two 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder under the fuselage, a bomb load equal to early medium bombers. Later versions added 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each equivalent to a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, witnessed P-47 ground attacks firsthand. They came in low, so low that soldiers could see the pilots' faces. Engines roaring, rockets screaming, heavy machine guns hammering. The effect was devastating. A column of 20 trucks was reduced to burning wreckage in one pass. Troops called them Jabos, fighter bombers. But these were something more, flying artillery with sniper-like accuracy. By June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe discovered just how completely the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47s provided air cover for the invasion, creating an almost impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were cut down mercilessly. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of JG-21, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported, "The sky belonged to the Americans. American pilots arrived in Europe already trained. Formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, tactics. They'd practiced against captured German aircraft, understanding enemy strengths and weaknesses. They knew their own systems intimately, poring over technical manuals German pilots never saw." Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, arriving in England in September 1944, embodied the American training edge. "I had 420 hours in my logbook," he recalled, including 75 hours in the P-47. "I'd fired at towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, studied gun camera film from real combat. On my first mission, I knew exactly what to do." The German pilot I faced couldn't have had half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight. By March 1945, Oberstleutnant Isef Priller, the same pilot who had mocked the Thunderbolts as pregnant cows in 1943, gave a statement too damning for German propaganda. "The Thunderbolt is the best fighter bomber ever built. Its firepower is unprecedented. Weapons that never jam, never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and fights like a fighter when needed. But beyond the machine is what it represents. Unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20. We lose 1, it's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for training, ammunition for practice, spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage, and courage without resources is just delayed defeat." By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. Experienced pilots were dead or captured. Airfields were cratered ruins. Even with planes and fuel, attacking meant facing P-47 formations controlling every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brechner, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, flew a single combat mission before the war ended. "I saw them diving from above. 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shook as if hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, the wings separated. I barely escaped. In my parachute, I watched them destroy my entire staff. 6 fighters gone in under a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was complete. German pilots developed what doctors called Jabo fever, physical symptoms triggered by reports of approaching Thunderbolts. Veterans who had flown Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear became physically ill before missions against P-47s. Ground troops learned to seek cover immediately at the sound of approaching engines. The roar of the Thunderbolt was synonymous with death. The statistics of P-47 operations were staggering. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 3,315 on the ground, 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored vehicles, 68,000 trucks, 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in combat, 150 on the ground, 1,500 vehicles, 150 locomotives, countless ships, barges, and installations. The 9th Air Force alone, primarily equipped with P-47s, flew 213,873 combat sorties, dropped 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched 60,000 rockets. The Thunderbolt units achieved a 4.6 to 1 kill ratio in aerial combat while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Behind these numbers lay the human cost. The Luftwaffe lost roughly 28,000 pilots killed against Western Allied forces. Many fell to the concentrated fire of American .50 caliber guns. Each loss represented years of training Germany could never replace. By war's end, the average German fighter pilot had less than 30 hours of combat experience. The average P-47 pilot had over 200. Captured Allied pilot debriefings at Oberursel revealed German assessments. The file on the P-47, continuously updated through the war, shows a complete reversal of opinion. April 1943. Large, unmaneuverable fighter. Inferior in every performance parameter except dive speed. Machine guns insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Minimal threat. December 1943. Exceptional high-altitude performance. Structural strength remarkable. Firepower increasingly problematic. Improved tactics. Significant threat above 25,000 feet. June 1944. Dominant fighter bomber. Superior to all German types above 20,000 feet. Devastating firepower, near impossible to shoot down. Critical threat at all altitudes. March 1945. Best fighter bomber of the war. Combination of firepower, durability, and performance unmatched. Pilot quality, exceptional. Unassailable in direct engagement. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, former adversaries met in peace. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, was asked about the P-47. His response was telling. "We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat," we said. "They built a bomber and called it a fighter. We were the ones who didn't understand. The Americans didn't try to build a European fighter. They built an American one, designed around production, firepower, and survivability. They knew that in a war of attrition, the plane that could take punishment and deliver devastating firepower would win. They were right." Galland later flew a captured P-47. The power was incredible. It climbed like it was falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable. Visibility excellent. Controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft wrapped in armor. But the thing that impressed me most? America built over 15,000 of these complex machines while fighting a two-ocean war. Each engine more advanced than anything we produced, yet built faster than we could build simple fighters. That's when I knew we never had a chance. And those guns, they called them Roosevelt's piano. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it destroyed it. Its design was a perfect reflection of American industrial philosophy, brute force engineering backed by unlimited resources. Every component overbuilt, overpowered, over-engineered. Wing spars could support 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. Engine mounts could withstand 12 G-forces. Control cables doubled with automatic backups. The ammunition feed system alone was a marvel. 8 separate ammo boxes, each holding 425 rounds, fed through electric boost motors to prevent jamming under sustained fire. The guns were electrically heated to prevent freezing at altitude. Each gun had its own charging mechanism and could be individually synchronized. The convergence was adjustable from 150 to 400 yards, letting pilots optimize for their preferred engagement range. Even after the war, some German veterans claimed the P-47 won through quantity, not quality. They argued German fighters were technically superior but overwhelmed by numbers. The records tell a different story. In fights where numbers were equal, P-47s consistently prevailed. The heavy machine gun armament, dismissed as inferior to cannon, proved devastating in actual combat. Gun camera analysis revealed why. Cannon shells, though individually more destructive, required precise aim and carried limited ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds. The P-47's weapons created a probability cloud of bullets, guaranteeing hits even with imperfect aim. A 2-second burst typically sent at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, enough to destroy it. The ammunition itself was superior. American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds used delayed action fuses that ensured penetration before detonation. The incendiary compound burned at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite aluminum structures. German 20mm shells, while heavier, often exploded on surface contact, causing spectacular but sometimes superficial damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the gross weight of some twin-engine fighters. Its engine produced more power than entire bomber formations from previous wars. Its guns delivered more firepower than a squad of infantry. Yet it was built by the thousands, flown by teenagers barely out of high school, and maintained under combat conditions by mechanics who learned their trade in weeks. German opinion transformed swiftly. In less than 2 years, the flying milk bottle went from object of ridicule to the most feared aircraft in the Luftwaffe's experience. Veterans who had faced Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without flinching spoke of P-47s in hushed tones decades later. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D sits among other legendary fighters. Its placard lists specifications and battle honors, but the real story is told by a small display case containing spent .50 caliber shells and a strip of gun camera film showing a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under fire. Below it is a quote from an unnamed German pilot captured in a 1945 interrogation report. "We laughed when we first saw them. Fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you and you ceased to exist. The laughter died with our comrades." The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as an object of derision and ended the war as an instrument of annihilation. In between, 8 synchronized Browning machine guns rewrote the rules of aerial warfare and buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of lead. German pilots had laughed at the ungainly American fighter in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken. The sky belonged to America,